So we have traveled back to 1948, and we are going to be talking about a movie today called Sorry, Wrong Number. This movie started out as a radio drama. So it was written, dramatized, an entirely acoustic performance for the original adaptation. Well, actually, I guess that wasn't an adaptation, the original version of the movie. No visual component, radio drama only depends solely on dialogue, music, and sound effects to help the listener imagine the characters and story.
I love talking about radio dramas because I love I don't know if it's fictionalized, it's probably true, where, they're using the coconuts for like the horse, and like how they did all the sound effects and stuff. I love that stuff.
I actually saw, we used to have this thing, I hope I'm remembering this correctly. Back in the Spokane Civic Theater, back in my college days, they would do like holiday radio stuff.
Yeah.
But they would actually just like everyone would be on stage, and you'd have three actors playing 17 characters, and there was a sound effects guy who would do the ding dong, the horses things, the take the shoes and just go clomp, 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 and all that kind of stuff. And if you wanted to, you could just close your eyes and listen to the whole thing and get the whole story. But if you wanted to actually watch what all these people had to do to put this kind of thing on, it was there. And it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've done a show or two like that where it's, a serialized radio drama. I don't know. I think it's cool. It's different.
So it's like all Foley work, right? So like when they walk through the dirt, you have a guy that like jumps on the sand and shuffles his feet and stuff and like crunches like the sand and stuff. Right,
or usually there's like a sandbox with a big mic right next to it, and the two guys, and you're just putting shoes and going clomp, 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 so they can get all that,
That must have been a fun job.
Yeah, hey, there are worse things to have to do.
Right.
So the radio drama itself was introduced in 1920s and was instantly popular, which is not surprising because before then, all people had to do for entertainment was sit around and talk to their families who they couldn't stand.
Yeah. Or listen to classical music. Boring.
Yeah.
It remained so in America until 1950s when television eclipsed radio as the favorite home entertainment.
I just always find it, I know he's canceled, but Woody Allen has this movie Radio Days, and it's all about these people who just sit around their radio and just listen. And like maybe mom is darning socks or crocheting a scarf or something, but there's just, that's what they did. There was a radio and they all just kind of listened to it. And I always looked at that and got, how boring. But if you don't have a television, if there's no such thing as a screen that you can turn on and the world can just beam into your living room, I guess you do what you can do. And before then, we read books, which is, also a form of entertainment that some of us still enjoy.
So one of the things I truly enjoy is audiobooks. And the thing I love about it is I can have my brain. So my brain is paying attention to the book, and then I can do a task that I need to do, but I don't need to think about as much. Like something that you really have to concentrate on and think about, you don't end up paying attention, or at least I don't end up paying attention to the audiobook. But when it's something that I'm a familiar task that I just need to make sure I'm doing the steps and I can let my brain kind of go, I can listen to the audiobook. So you're kind of more productive. So like, sitting there darning socks and stuff, she's getting stuff done while being entertained. So I kind of see a parallel there between, original radio dramas and like audiobooks now.
Yeah, I listen to audiobooks when I drive. So that's just, if I've got lots of long drives ahead of me, I can actually read a book while I'm, doing that.
I don't love audiobooks, which is weird for somebody who reads as much as I do, but I do love podcasts. And like when I go, I walk a lot. And so when I walk, I listen to podcasts, and it's just, it for me, because I'm exercising and I don't love to exercise, it keeps me occupied. So the next thing I know, I'm like, I listen to this whole podcast and I also walk 2 miles. Like, great.
Yeah. Same kind of format.
Yeah.
The most famous radio drama was, of course, Orson Welles' The War of the Worlds in 1938, which inspired stories of mass panic that were, in truth, greatly over-exaggerated.
It's a scary-ass radio drama, and as I said to the boys earlier this week, you should watch the Tom Cruise movie. It is really fucking scary. Like, if that is your jam, it's really good.
Which kind of shows why that was, like, one of the most, like, famous and why people got so terrified, because looking at that story through Steven Spielberg's imagination is kind of bonkers. That's like people are just imagining what he's saying.
Well, but the stories of the mass panic were not that people thought, oh, what a scary story. The stories were people actually thought aliens were landing and that the world was shutting down and which actually very few people turned on the radio and believed. that aliens were actually landing on Earth and we were now at war.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past Americans to think that we know that aliens were landing.
True. That's why I think those stories have got legs, because we can clearly believe that we are that dumb.
Correct. Especially in current years.
Not many of us were that dumb. I mean, I think that, a lot of people probably listened to it and went, oh, this is really scary. Like, what a great story. But a few people ran to their bomb shelters and thought the world was actually ending. And that is not true. Not all of us did that.
So maybe this was an intelligence test? I don't know.
Anyway, I mean, they did. I mean, Orson Welles did present it that way. Like, all of a sudden came on. It was like, boop, 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 breaking news, and so they just played it up as though that were, but, I think he was hoping a lot more people would fall for it. And I think everyone's like, oh, that was a pretty good radio drama, because they were used to it. They'd heard stuff on the radio like that before.
I mean, try it now. I bet a large contingent of America would fall for it.
You put it on Fox News, a lot of
that's what I'm saying.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. This is the Rewind Project. I am Eric.
I'm Allie.
I'm Matt.
And today we are discussing Sorry, Wrong Number, a film from 1948 that is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. This is the first in a series of 7 conversations about movies from 1948. This one was directed by Anatole Litvak, with a screenplay by Lucille Fletcher, who wrote the original radio play that this was based on. And it was a very famous radio drama. In fact, it came back year after year after year. It was a real fan favorite. And it was kind of this inevitable thing, like, they've got to turn this into a movie at some point, because it was just so insanely popular.
I was pleased to see that they kept the woman who wrote it able to write the screenplay. Like, it is 1948, #patriarchy. So when I saw that on screen, I was pleased.
Did they reenact it every year, or did they have a recording that they played every year?
I know that it was recorded. And in fact, talking just now about, audiobooks I like to listen to when I drive. If I ever have a drive that's just a little over a half an hour, I think I'm going to try to find the original radio drama and just spend a half an hour and go, I wonder what this was, because it was but I know that Agnes Moorehead played Leona several times. So I think that it was a live performance. And that was part of the thing about radio drama too, is that it was exciting because it was live. It was almost like you were listening to, it had that element of live theater, because anything could happen and the actors are doing it right here, right now, and it's being beamed into your home that instant. It's kind of like the reason why we like some of those live musicals that get done every once in a while, not so much anymore. But the idea that they're live is just kind of exciting. It's like, this is happening right now and we're just watching it.
So this is me and my Gen X attitude. We need to record that so we can just keep replaying it and make more money and monetize every single time and not have to pay as much.
Okay.
I've ruined the entire society.
I mean, listen, you could record them anyway, and you can watch them on a loop, and people do. But, I always just kind of said, spending all that money, I mean, if somebody literally forgets their lines, it's not even worth it to me. It's like, just have a backup, man. And for whatever reason, I go to Broadway shows all the time, and I never think that. No one on Broadway is going to forget their lines. that doesn't happen if you do 8 shows a week. But when you're all gearing up for this one live performance, yikes. I have seen things happen. I mean, Matt and I just went to go see a show last week, and the floor elevator didn't work, and actors had to kind of climb out of the. I mean, it was a very large step they had to get on stage, and they just did it. But there was this moment of, what the fuck, is this thing not gonna? I guess not. And there they went, and it was kind of okay, magic of live theater.
Yeah, I mean, I've done shows like that where suddenly you're in a blackout, with all the lights go off, and you have to, or somebody doesn't miss their, get their entrance, and you have to riff on stage for 5 minutes. Yeah,
Yep. Or someone. I haven't done the thing where people forget their lines, but people have skipped forward 5 pages and missed a very important piece that we have to figure out. How do we get that piece of information back so the audience knows what the hell is going on? Magic of live theater, everyone.
Yeah, good times.
So this film had one Oscar nomination, no wins. Barbara Stanwyck did get a nomination for Best Actress. And I will say, whatever flaws this movie does have, I don't put any of them on Barbara Stanwyck as a performer. She's practically a patron saint of the pod at this point. We've done 3 Barbara Stanwyck movies in our 5 seasons. It was Double Indemnity, and then hard right turn into Christmas in Connecticut. And now here we are. With Sorry, Wrong Number.
I like Barbara Stanwyck a lot. Let me tell you, she was doing the most as Leona. And as somebody who also does the most, like I felt a lot of kindred spirit. I was like, and I guess we should say that we're going to spoil the fuck out of this movie because I'm going to spoil it right now. When I found out, I was like, so this is just psychosomatic. Like, she could actually walk down the stairs. I feel a little kinship, I'm not going to lie.
She could, but she couldn't. I mean, okay, so let me just say very quickly the plot of this movie, since we're already deep into a conversation about the cast. The plot of this movie is that a bedridden woman hears her own murder being planned on a cross telephone line. And I don't think she realizes at first that they're talking about her.
No, it's like halfway through the movie.
Eventually she clicks in like, I'm the woman they're going to kill at 11:15 tonight. And that makes it even a little bit scarier. So obviously heading up this cast is Barbara Stanwyck as Leona Stevenson, who, I would agree with Allie, was doing a lot as Leona. You've got a limited plane. You've got this little bed that's your stage, man. So you better take up all the space you possibly can.
Don't you know I'm an invalid? I like every conversation.
And yes, it comes to light that she is probably has a mental illness more so than a physical one. She thinks she has a very weak heart. Her heart is actually fine. Her mother died of a heart attack when she was either during childbirth or when she was very, very young. So she never knew her mom. And her dad kind of said, you've got a weak heart. You've got a weak heart your whole life. And she's also a little spoiled. And so those two things go together. And every time somebody upsets her, my heart. And I think there's a question for me is she faking it, or is it truly psychosomatic? Does she have a mental illness? In which case, she really can't run upstairs and stuff, because if she is genuinely afraid she's going to have a heart attack if she exerts herself, then she's got to prop herself up every time she walks across the bedroom. If she's just faking it, then she's just taking it to the nth degree.
I think she's convinced herself that she has this thing, because she's flopping all around from like piece of furniture to piece of furniture, like she can't lift herself up.
She's flopping around,
patting her head because it's like so much exercise to get from the couch or from the chair to the bed. And it's like, okay, you would know whether you feel physically tired from that if you actually had a heart condition.
Counterpoint though, if you are stressed the fuck out and you think someone is coming to kill you, your heart can start beating through your chest without you doing any physical exertion whatsoever. And if you truly believe that is going to bring on a heart attack at any possible moment, that might cause you to take some precaution. I mean, look, I'm not saying she wasn't doing a whole lot. I agree with Allie there. I think there is this question of how much of this was truly in her head and how much of it was not really in her head. She was just manipulative and she was doing a big fake out.
That's a true statement, but she was acting like that from Act 1. I mean, so before she even thought that
she's
it was
a fragile creature,
yeah,
Matthew.
So it was just kind of like ridiculous from the get-go.
I don't think she was faking it.
I don't either.
I don't think she was faking it. I do think that it's definitely mental illness. Maybe it's like a Munchausen sort of situation where, like, obviously she's going to get a lot more attention as an invalid than she would as, regular Leona Stevenson, gal about town. But I mean, look, and as somebody who, I've been known to chew some scenery in my day. I do love I love a scenery chewer, but yeah, definitely doing the most. But I was never not entertained. And I never, and I liked the way that she sort of built up her character. And we're going to talk about this in a second, I know, but I liked the flashbacks because I was able to see sort of like a non-bedridden Leona and it kind of put it together for me. So,
and I think in the half an hour version of this, the whole thing just takes place in real time, and it's just a bunch of phone calls, right? And she's on the phone with everyone. You're basically listening on her phone line. Here, you do get to see her before she took to her bed. I will say, not so much about Barbara, but about Leona, her character. I was kind of surprised when I started watching this that Leona wasn't a lot more sympathetic.
She's a real bitch.
Leona's a real bitch. And as someone who is the target of a murder plot, you'd think you'd have more sympathy for that person. And sometimes I did not.
No.
She's an awful person in a lot of ways, very spoiled, very entitled, very the world revolves around me. And it was a little upsetting.
Yeah.
But in a good way. It was interesting because just playing the total victim, like, oh, woe is me, damsel in distress, I think would have been a lot more boring.
True. But I mean, you couldn't root for her for anything in this movie at all. And it was partly because of the flopping around from piece of furniture to piece of furniture. They could have found a better way to stage that for poor Barbara Stanwyck. I think she was just trying to come up with a way to visualize this for people. Give her a cane, give her something so that when she gets out of bed, she has to look like she needs help to move around. There was her just kind of running and fainting and trying to prop herself up was ridiculous from the get-go.
Or don't get out of bed. I mean,
yes.
Because if she truly thinks she can't get out of the bed, then that would be,
collapse to the floor and crawl to the next piece of furniture. Convince me that this is a real condition. The minute she got out of the bed, and I'm like, no, this is.
Yeah, I didn't think she could get out of the bed. That was also surprising to me. I mean, I don't know. I agree about. I'm glad that I thought she was going to be sort of just like a kind of a boring whatever, a boring invalid. That sounds horrible, but you know what I mean. But I like that she had a little spice to her. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, I thought that the, that's one of the reasons why I feel like the Best Actress nomination was probably pretty earned because she did have to carry a movie as a not very sympathetic person.
Movie about her murder as a that's crazy.
Which is not an easy thing to do. You have to, there has to be something kind of there.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to her pig of a husband, but oddly sympathetic at times and played by the hunky Burt Lancaster. I think we better go first to our hotness correspondent to talk about Burt for a moment.
Yeah, I gotta say Burt didn't do anything. Who did do it for me is Wendell Corey as Dr. Alexander, which I know that we're gonna get. He was definitely seemed hotter to me. I couldn't get past the sliminess and I couldn't get past just the general. He just wasn't a happy person, Henry Stevenson. It was basically a marriage of two miserable people.
He was married to a bitch.
Yeah, but he was not that. I didn't find him attractive even in the dancing scene. I was sort of oh, okay. He's one of those with a chip on his shoulder. He's from nowhere. He didn't finish high school. He just thinks that he's better than everybody else. Yeah, I never liked him from the jump. So, I mean, Burt Lancaster is I'm sure, a lovely human being. And yes, he is attractive, but he didn't do anything like the doctor did for me in this movie.
The scene where he meets with Sally for dinner, that's where he loses you immediately because he just completely treats her like she doesn't exist at that entire meeting. And it was just really oh, he's actually going to be a dick. That sucks. Because I was kind of hoping to be a little bit more sympathetic. Once he starts to regale the tale to the doctor later of how he met Leona and their entire relationship, you feel a little bit more sympathetic towards him. But every time he has a real interaction with somebody, he's just a dick. So,
see, and I guess I appreciated the fact that Henry wasn't just this low-life asshole. He was a low-life asshole, but he wasn't just a low-life asshole.
The bar is so low these days, ladies and gentlemen.
But he just wasn't 100% evil. I actually did kind of sympathize a little bit with the idea that he wanted to go out and get a job that was not connected to his wife's father. And he thought to himself, you know what? I am a pretty smart guy. I do have some ambition. Mm-hmm. And yes, I'm a vice president, but I'm not doing anything. I push paper around and it's just a total title without any responsibility. And I want to do something with my life. And father-in-law is like, no. And wife is like, hell no. And I kind of thought, let him do his thing, and that, mm-hmm. and if they had, listen, he's still a pig. You don't get to kill your wife for the insurance money. You don't get to do that ever. Don't misunderstand me. But there were times when I was just kind of like, during some of the flashbacks, I was thinking, when he told her that I've got a job interview with somebody who's not connected to your father, I was like, okay, go for that, and she's like, do you know who I am? And it's, oh God, Leona.
Here's the thing though, it's 1948. If he truly wanted that, he could have left her completely and started over again and could have created a new personality, new name, everything. Nobody would have been able to track him because records are shady back then. So we were not good at record keeping. There was no internet back there. There was nothing. So he could have actually just started over somewhere else besides Chicago and probably lived a pretty good life if he really wanted it. The problem is, he was living with Leona in the high life and he really liked it and he wanted his cake and eat it too.
Totally.
So
no, I'm not saying he's a good guy. I'm just saying he had some shades of gray. He wasn't 100%,
No, he wasn't like a mustache curling evil guy,
and they both did. I mean, I don't think she deserved to be murdered, but she also wasn't a very nice person a lot of the time. And I don't think that he should have murdered anybody. But there were times when I kind of thought, he wants to get out from under the thumb of this. And I think going back to something Allie was saying earlier, hashtag patriarchy, I think for men in 1948, the idea that you are controlled by your wife's money, that kind of emasculation was just something that a lot of men in the audiences in 1948 probably went, be a man, get over, right. You are such a cuck right now.
I was just about to say, he was almost cuckolded by her and her money, for sure, and I get that.
Yeah. And so that's part of what, again, does it play as well 75 years later? Not as well, because again, you can be an equal partner with your spouse and still hold your head up high. You don't probably need to resort to selling drugs on the black market. That's maybe not a great life choice, Henry.
That was a real twist. I was like, we're going there, are we?
Yeah, and after just watching The Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix, which is, a modern adaptation that brings in the whole opioid epidemic, I was just kind of like, this is prescient.
That was one of the best things I've watched on television.
Really? Should I watch it?
Yes. Very good. I mean, it's jump scary. It's a scary thing.
That doesn't bother me.
But yeah, it's great. And Carla Gugino should be a much bigger star. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. All right.
She's so good.
Nothing but time today, so maybe I'll dive in.
Dialogue, acting, all fucking phenomenal.
Yeah. And if you know anything about Edgar Allan Poe, it just highlights the experience. You don't need to know anything, but if you do, it's fun.
I know lots, so we're good.
Yeah. So you have episodes called The Pit and the Pendulum, The Telltale Heart, Murder at the Rue Morgue, but it's all one big story. It's fascinating. This is not a Follow the House of Usher podcast, although it could be.
Could be.
But the Rerun Project highly recommends Follow the House of Usher. Let's move on to sweet little Ann Richards as Sally Hunt. Lord.
All I could think of was the Texas governor, Ann Richards, when I read this before
Maybe it's her. Maybe it was her. Who knows? Was she an actress before she was a politician? Could be.
Maybe so. I got to look that up. I think she was a nice little foil. Obviously the good girl, obviously the, the poor girl, because she grew up with Henry in the nothing town. And
but a little bit of gumption. She follows her husband all the way out to that creepy island and watches him in the,
I did let our Staten Island correspondent, Kristen Murray, know. I was like, I'm watching a movie that features Staten Island very significantly, and she had never heard of this movie. So, I think she was a good. She was good for the exposition. She filled in a lot of holes.
Nice palate cleanser too to the other two people.
True.
So, yeah.
You needed some people. Yeah. She and the next one.
Yes.
There are some people in the world who are good. And if you just, the movie's not entirely cynical, although enough.
Yeah.
Very noir-y that way.
Yeah.
Sally Hunt was a woman who existed on screen for a time and gave us lots of useful exposition.
And the most annoying fucking son. I wanted to punch him in the face.
He was barely on screen.
No, but he was on screen. He was extremely annoying. Like, the first time I was like, all right, fine, annoying kid. And then the second time when he was like in the mix at breakfast, I was like, shut the fuck up. Like, he was no.
Adults are talking.
I was like, you need to shut up and
see,
be less
Allie's
annoying.
coming to my side when it comes to child actors. It's like, it doesn't take much for them to just be so extremely annoying. And you know what? Some kids got it and some kids don't. The problem with this little kid in this movie is that it sounded like he was reciting the lines that his mom had practiced with him 5 minutes before, because that's exactly what he was doing. He was not an actor.
Should I go to bed now?
Yeah, there are little kids who actually know how to just be in a scene, and they're not acting with like all caps. And this kid was not one of them, sadly.
So I guess I just kind of expect that from 1940s films, because there's a lot of films like people were just given their lines, and it's like,
sure.
So when a kid is like that, it doesn't affect me at all. I mean, so I guess I just didn't even process that. I mean, especially since you still have Leona, who is the most annoying person in the movie. I have never wanted a character to die so quickly. Like, I was just like waiting for the end of the movie so I could just like watch it. But yeah. So
moving on to Allie's ex-husband in a former life, Wendell Corey as Dr. Alexander, the apparently hot cardiologist.
Did you not think he was hot?
I mean, next to Burt Lancaster, no, but
really interesting.
I mean, the character was much better. Which one would I like to marry, Dr. Alexander or Henry Stevenson? I'll take the doctor with a nice office. Do I want to get frisky with Wendell Corey or Burt Lancaster? Hello, Burt.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, no. Burt in this movie didn't do anything for me. I thought it was interesting. I actually had been so tainted by the movie at this point that I thought Dr. Alexander was also going to be kind of nefarious. But he ended up being like mostly, he was kind of like that brisk doctor that we all know. We all have those doctors that like have no bedside manner. But he ended up actually having her best interest at heart, which was nice to see.
Despite his girlfriend who was like, come back to the table. You're ruining our date night.
Come on. Let's get some cocktails. That's how I picture her in my mind. When he played another key role in sort of like the exposition of what's going on.
Yeah, but he got to do the exposition with a really cool plot twist halfway through. Yeah. She's not really sick. What?
Which I kind of felt like we could tell in the beginning. Like, this was just, she's just hysterical. I had an inkling
in my mind.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was interesting. For a long time, we didn't know what was wrong with her. I mean, we didn't even know if it was her heart or what, but she seemed very healthy as she chain smoked in her beautiful lace nightgown with the diamond brooch at her neck in a beautifully appointed 4-poster bed. I'm like, if this is being an invalid, like, sign me up. Come on.
I thought maybe she like didn't have use of her legs. I went there. I was like,
I went there too. I was like,
I don't know.
Yeah, what is wrong? And then we found out, she has heart trouble. Okay. And then we find out, no, actually, it's all in her mind. She does not. Her heart is perfectly healthy.
Well, she has heart trouble. It's just emotional.
Well.
As she verbally abuses everybody.
She's emotionally unhealthy, but the muscle in her chest is doing just fine.
Totally fine.
And then I just put this guy in as a interesting, aside, because, most of us are familiar with Ed Begley Jr., but this was Ed Begley Jr.'s dad, Ed Begley, as James Cotterill, the cough drop king and father of Leona, who has a little scene at the beginning, and I just thought, oh, that's Ed Begley.
No, I always like to see him, because obviously we know his son, but I think it's cool. And he was fine. He was, he was a blustery man.
Yeah, and I learned so much about her through him, because it's like, Daddy, my husband is disappointing me. We'll all call him tomorrow and I'll fix it. I'm like, oh, Jesus. Okay, I'm getting lots about this setup right away.
I really enjoyed Harold Vermilea, too, who played Waldo Evans, the scientist, who gets pulled into Henry's little scheme. He was a nice little a nice part of the film too, like a palate cleanser, just like Sally was for me.
I liked him because I thought that also, maybe this is just my mindset. I also thought that he was going to be nefarious too, and he ended up being like this sort of like cuddly little Englishman chemist.
Well, he was a cuddly little Englishman chemist, but he was also selling drugs in the black market. I mean, he was technically he was as nefarious as anybody in this movie.
But he wasn't coming to kill Leona.
No, but he was, again, this movie has a way of having very sympathetic, awful villains and very unsympathetic victims, which to me is just interesting. I think there's a much lazier way to go about it, and this movie did not do that, which, I'm not saying it's a perfect film, but I appreciated that. Okay, so as we've been talking about, this was originally a radio drama that was presented on the radio in a 30-minute script. Orson Welles, who wrote The War of the Worlds and was, as we know, we've done some Orson Welles films here. He was kind of a giant at the time, proclaimed that Fletcher's script was the finest script ever written for the radio. So it was a big hit, and I am kind of curious to maybe give it a listen at some point. But to make it into a feature film, I looked at when I pulled it up, I was like 89 minutes. I'm like, oh, Allie's going to be real happy about that.
I was.
And I will tell you that about an hour into this movie, I'm like, is it possible for a movie to be this short and still feel a little too long? I mean, I could tell immediately where the movie diverged from the original. And that was, as Allie had mentioned, all of these flashbacks. So, the original drama included her calls with Sally, with Dr. Alexander, with Waldo Evans. And they were all of a sudden we pan away from the conversation and we go into these extended flashback sequences. Allie, you said that worked for you. You liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I always am nosy, so I like to know the backstory of things, like always and forever. It did feel, some of the flashbacks were, yes, a little too long in the tooth, like could have been wrapped up a little quicker, but I felt like it gave the characters a little bit more depth. And obviously when you're doing a radio play, it's different and you're just trying to get the facts out and entertain people. But I did like knowing sort of what Leona was like. I did like knowing that she knew Sally and basically like stole her boyfriend. I did like learning about what like the evil deed was, because I was really clueless, much like what was wrong with Leona. I was like, what is this big bad thing that's going to force somebody to kill Leona? Like, I enjoyed learning about that, but I did think they were like maybe like a smidge too long, some of them. But I liked them going to Staten Island and going to the abandoned house, and it just like the mystery was good, which I liked. But
I kind of feel just knowing Leona would give anybody cause to want to kill Leona.
Why is she a target for her? Because she's awful.
Because she is a lousy person.
Because she's an awful person. Well, I figured it had something to do with the money. I mean, she's rich. That's not something that is hidden from you.
I'm betting there's probably a prenup or something, and he's just looking to get away. Like,
I don't think they did prenup so much in those days.
I don't feel like there's a prenup.
Yeah.
I would be surprised.
And so I think as the husband, he just would get, what was coming to him. And I mean, not, the father-in-law is still alive, so not the company, but a whole bunch of money. Yes.
Yeah, you get it. And he wouldn't have to deal with Leona anymore. So, I mean, it's a win-win.
I kind of felt like, everything that I read about this before I started, I sometimes will do a little bit of pre-research before I do this. And, I read not about the movie, but just about the radio drama. So I was kind of putting myself in the place of, a 1948 viewer who loved this thing on the radio and, ooh, they made a movie out of it. Let's go see the movie. And everything I read about the radio drama was that for a half an hour, you are just like fingernails clawing into your thighs. Like you are on the edge of your seat. And I didn't feel that way for 90 minutes in this movie. I mean, I just felt like as soon as there was some tension, and granted, there was some overacting and there was some leaning on all the furniture and all of that. But I mean, I think that the whole piece around Sorry, Wrong Number was that tension. And then finally at the end, there's this ending and it's like, release. And This was kind of like a little bit of tension, and now a very long story about Leona cutting in on a dance and da-da-da-da-da. And I was just like, and it didn't propel me through this thing. It felt very interrupted to me.
I think they missed an opportunity here, because had it been me, what I would have done with the story is made Sally a phone operator who works with Henry to scare Leona to death by mistakenly like having these conversations be connected through. So every time she picks up the phone, she gets a part of it. And then so throughout the night, she's getting more and more flustered because there's nobody there. And they're trying to force her to have a fucking heart attack. And that's the entire scandal of the movie, as you see her like she's actually bedridden. And like this just keeps happening and happening. And then you start to piece it together that they're actually working together to kill her off naturally from a heart attack so that they can actually ride off into the sun with her money.
Yeah, and if she died of a heart attack, then that's an easy kind of fix in terms of, well, I didn't kill her. She had a heart attack alone in her house. I mean, that would have been a much better alibi. I mean, yeah, that's a good idea.
I mean, I didn't have to be on the edge of my seat. I was interested. I wanted to know, through the whole thing, I wanted to know about Leona. I wanted to know what this big bad thing was that was going to result in her murder. I wanted to, I was curious the whole time. So I didn't have to be on the edge of my seat. I was still interested in what was going on.
Yeah. And it's funny, like Barbara Stanwyck said, when she was making this movie, I think when they got to the bedroom set, and it was usually just her on the set by herself acting with a telephone, she said it was so exhausting by the end of the day. I was just so emotionally drained by how scared I was the entire time. And I think that the idea was that the audience was supposed to feel the same way. And I just didn't. I mean, but I did, I did like seeing kind of how it all, like the conversation that she has with Sally has a lot more weight to it once we know the whole backstory between the two.
True.
And I love that part of the story, that Sally is actually an old friend of hers that she stole that Leona stole Henry from.
Yeah. Well, a friend, someone
roommate,
who was there that she didn't
whatever.
need to be that mean to, and just had something she wanted. So she just took it. And I also really liked the fight that Barbara Stanwyck and Burt Lancaster had when she is up and mobile and moving around and just being a real not nice person, when he's, and that, again, it was interesting. It was like, oh, wait, she's the victim and he's the bad guy. But wow, in this fight, I'm really siding with him.
Yeah.
And she's really not being a nice person. Okay. So now we are going to spoil the hell out of this movie. Matt was not shocked at all. I was legit kind of shocked. Now, again, we're going to spoil this movie. If you have not seen this movie and you would all want to be surprised by the ending, then turn us off right now. But she dies at the end. At the end, the killer just walks up the stairs and she screams, and he's got these big white gloves and he chokes the life out of her and she's dead. And I was like, what? We spent this whole movie with her trying to save her life, and the killer just walked upstairs and just killed her.
Well, I would have been surprised had I not thought, oh, there's only 5 minutes left in this movie. Surely she doesn't die. Let me read Eric's outline.
Oops.
Oopsie.
Because I usually don't read the outlines just in case, if I haven't seen the movie, just in case there are spoilers.
There's a reason for that.
But I figured, I didn't expect it, because I figured 5 minutes left. Okay, I'll read it, because it was getting late and I wanted to make sure I knew what the game was or whatever. And then I was like, oh, fuck. I was so mad at myself because I would have been surprised. I don't know that I thought that somebody was necessarily going to come to her aid, because clearly everybody was gone. But I was surprised that it did actually end in her murder.
Yeah. I was just, and I thought for a movie in the 40s, it's like the killer got away with it. And the killer also bit it himself in the end of the movie. And that's where the 1940s Hays Code comes in. Like, Burt Lancaster couldn't have walked away with the money.
Right.
The bad people who killed Leona also simultaneously were killing Henry in a phone booth in New Jersey somewhere.
That was, he had a badge. It was, what's his face? It was the police or the FBI.
Yeah.
Yeah, he showed
Okay.
a badge at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they were arresting him. So
they were
he did
arresting him.
have
He's not getting away with it.
No,
He's
he had
gonna
consequences.
I guess he's gonna rot in jail.
Yeah.
I thought they were both getting killed at the same time, which was kind of fun to me.
No, that would have been better.
If I had had a confetti cannon, I would have shot it off. I have never wanted a character to die
Matt.
so quickly in my life. She was horrible. Oh.
So I'm understanding that Matt really didn't like this character, Allie. Are you picking that up?
I guess so.
But I was kind of shocked by it. I mean, it just I really truly expected that we wouldn't be sitting here for 90 minutes watching this whole thing if in fact everything she was fearing was just going to happen without any kind of variation whatsoever. She just dies. And then, it's funny. I heard so much about this iconic line, and I thought that the iconic line in this movie was "the call is coming from inside the house." Mm-hmm. That's a completely different movie.
It is.
That is When a Stranger Calls. It has nothing to do with Sorry, Wrong Number. I don't know where I got the two of those conflated. But no, the iconic line in this one is the minute after she has the life choked out of her, somebody calls her and asks for Leona Stevenson, and the killer's like, sorry, wrong number.
Sorry,
and then
wrong number.
hangs up. And that's because this, I don't remember what the original title was, but someone suggested that she change it to Sorry, Wrong Number based on the last line that she did right. But they're like, that really ought to be your title. And she was like, oh, interesting.
I got this movie confused for a second with Wait Until Dark, which is about the blind woman and the people coming to attack her. And I was like, is this? But obviously it was not. But I feel like that and When a Stranger Called, like there's all sorts of, they're from the same genre.
Yeah,
really.
and there's this, when I was doing my post-viewing research, I read an article about how Sorry, Wrong Number invented the telephone horror trope. And it went through all these movies that use it, from When a Stranger Calls, Scream obviously,
yes.
the whole beginning of Scream is in a way kind of an homage to Sorry, Wrong Number. But this whole idea that when you hear something but can't see it, it kind of adds this element of scariness to it, that this was the first thing to kind of exploit. There's
a couple really good Twilight Zone episodes that also deal with like telephone and cross lines and stuff like that. So
cool. All right. You ready for some fun facts?
Yes.
Off we go. Lucille Fletcher, who wrote the radio play and screenplay, actually was married for quite a long time to Bernard Herrmann, who was Hitchcock's favorite composer. So he was the man who created lots of these iconic sound motifs throughout. So they were both in the industry. Apparently, he was not a very nice man who cheated on her a lot, which might have had some instances of showing up in her work occasionally. Maybe. There we go. This film has been remade for television twice. The first remake was in the 50s starring Shelley Winters. Ooh. And the second remake was in the 80s starring WKRP in Cincinnati's Lonnie Anderson. I saw a still from that one, and she's got the big blonde bouffant and the very, very lacy fancy nightgown sitting in her bed with a very kind of old-fashioned phone with the little mouthpiece that curls around, but with a shocked look on her face. And I was like, that looks so cheesy. I could totally, if I had a lot of friends around and a couple gummies, I think we could probably enjoy.
Yeah, I'm into it. I would see Shelley Winters too. I like Shelley Winters, so I think this would be a great stage play too. So.
Yeah, I would especially like to see it maybe in a one-act version. Yeah. Just the original half hour. Just, take the script and then just put it on stage and see, what happens.
Cool. Cast me as Leona.
I would much rather see you play Leona. You'd be more sympathetic.
No, I really disagree, Matt. And it's not to say that Allie is not a lovely person. The character is not sympathetic. And I think that if Allie's version was more sympathetic, it would mean that she wasn't pumping up the bitchiness quite enough. Leona's bitchy.
I can pump up the bitchiness,
which I think is interesting. And I think that, again, I don't think this is a perfect film. I don't think I'm as down on it as Matt is, but I don't blame any of it on Barbara Stanwyck. I think that,
I don't either, but I didn't find the character interesting either, even though she was just super bitchy. You would think I would, but it was just so one-dimensional, her character. I just could not get into her at all, and I just wanted her to be choked to death. So I was very happy at the end.
I guess we could just end the podcast now and scene.
Yeah. And I guess, for me, it was just when this movie started, I was like, oh, poor woman who's trapped in bed and they're all coming to kill her. She's going to be this total victim who is just, poor her. And it wasn't poor her. She was, she stole her friend's man and then, kept him under her thumb and kept running to daddy every time there was a problem and, wouldn't let him live in a house that he, because it was her money, so she could control where he lived. And when he tried to get them a nicer place to live, which I'm sorry, was as much for her as it was for him, no, I don't want to because it's my money and I can do what I want. I just, she was interesting. And part of it was, if it was just the fact that she was rich, but an angel, then of course they wanted to kill her for the money. But the fact that she was kind of bitchy, it was also, why do they want to kill her? Does he just hate her?
Right.
That was a real possibility. And it turns out that wasn't the entire reason.
It was some of it, though.
It was some of it. That made that decision a lot easier.
It sweetened the deal. It was a bonus.
For sure.
It sweetened the deal that he wouldn't have to deal with her anymore, but really he needed the cash. Agnes Moorehead, who you might know better as Samantha's mother and Dora on Bewitched, she played Leona on the radio multiple times. She was the original Leona, and I think when they brought it back and back, these were live performances, and she always reprised her role and got a lot of notoriety out of it. When they decided to make the film, I think they probably decided she wasn't pretty enough to lead the movie, so they offered her a smaller role, and she was insulted and turned it down.
Good for her.
So there you go. And she's still fabulous. Finally, cute little fun fact. Do you remember that little jewel clasped cigarette case that Leona offers to Henry during one of those flashbacks? That actually belonged to Barbara Stanwyck. She brought that from home. It was a gift from Joan Crawford, who was described as one of her dearest friends, but I've read in other places on the internet the two of them were probably lovers, and it was something, that was a little, happy Valentine's Day, honey. Barbara Stanwyck, by all accounts, to the extent that, she was never out, she was never, but probably very much a lesbian.
Really?
Joan, probably bisexual is what we think about Joan. She certainly enjoyed the men in her life, some of them, but likely had affairs with women as well.
Love to see it.
And apparently Joan and Barbara were a Hollywood couple, kind of an open secret, but there you are.
Huh. I thought you were going to say they hated each other. I like this much better.
Oh, no. Did not. The opposite.
Yeah.
So, we ready for a game?
Always.
Yes.
Okay, so a little riff of Stephen King's It. I decided we would call this game Stephen King's IT. It doesn't have to have anything to do with Stephen King, although it can if you want it to. The idea is to kind of design a thriller horror movie. And by design, I mean just give us a rough outline of what happens in this movie and how you're going to craft a plot line around two ideas. One, it's a thriller horror. It's meant to scare and titillate your audience. And two, it's based on a relatively modern technology, kind of the same way telephones were in 1948. They weren't quite as ubiquitous as they are now. Things could happen like a crossed line where all of a sudden you pick up your phone and you hear two people plotting a murder across town, and that could happen. This time, we're going to use different kinds of technology that are a little bit, that did not exist in 1948 and are, maybe not brand new, but relatively modern to us. So I put out some options beforehand, and Allie was the first to call dibs on her option. So Allie, we're going to hear from you first, and you're going to let us know your thriller/horror movie based on text messaging.
Yes. I love to text. We love to text. It's so fun and easy, but it's also really easy to be untraceable and much easier than I think anything else because you can have a burner phone, you can mask it. Like there's lots of ways that you can hide text messages. So I am going to do an adaptation of the book, The Chain, not the Fleetwood Mac song. Also one of my faves, but the book is okay. I think it could actually be a little bit better. So basically it is about a woman who gets a phone call. And so obviously all of the phone calls in the movie would be changed to text messages because I just think that's just a little bit scarier. That her kid has been kidnapped. And in order to receive the child back, she has to not only kidnap another child, but also, and this is the real scary part, get $25,000 in Bitcoin.
Oh.
So it's really like two technologies here. So now we're dealing with the text messages. We also have Bitcoin, which I still don't, I will never understand Bitcoin. And how can she break the chain? You know, she's a cancer survivor. She's a single mom. How can she break this kidnapping chain? I just think in the book, it's all phone calls. And I think that, and you hear people's voices, this is very anonymous. And I think it like adds a little bit of a scarier edge.
I like it.
Okay. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So Maddie's going to go next. Matt, your technology that you're going to base a thriller horror movie on was smartwatches.
So I kind of took the title of the game literally. So I went back to Stephen King, and I am going to take some inspiration from his book Thinner.
Oh, I love that book.
so smartwatches, majority of people use them really for health. And if you have an Apple smartwatch, the Apple Watch, you have to close your rings. Okay, so the story is going to be based on this girl who is exercising. She's obsessed with closing her rings. She has a community of people that she shares her status with, which you can do from the watch.
You can.
And she ends up like running into this woman and is absolutely it does not care. And she's angry with the woman for being in the way and everything while she's doing this. Woman turns around and curses her. Okay. So she cannot close her rings no matter what she does. And she's almost to the point where it's gaslighting her. Like she thinks, okay, well, maybe I haven't exercised because she's obsessed with it now. Even tries to get a new watch, doesn't matter. Same thing happens on the watch and she cannot avoid it. So she essentially just exercises herself to death. I went a little bit farther. And because I had just watched The Fall of the House of Usher, I went through and did a little bit of casting here. So Kate Siegel, who played Celeste, is going to be my girl that's the exerciser. Carla Gugino is going to be the woman that curses her.
Of course.
Mike Flanagan's going to write it, but I want it to be directed by Ari Aster, who did Midsommar and Hereditary. I don't really like either of those movies, but I appreciate that he tried to do something different. I would rather see him direct somebody else's material, and I think you'll get a better product. So...
Okay.
I love that.
So I'm going to go last. The technology that was left after text messages and smartwatches were snapped up were Zoom calls, which is something that I work from home. So I live my entire life through Zoom calls now. So I kind of constructed this story where you've got this team. And, I don't think I want to set it during COVID, although, because that just feels dated at this point. But I was watching the morning show and it's all like going through like COVID and isolation and I'm like, I don't want my entertainment to relive that. That was just,
I'm watching the morning show too, and I just started season 2, and they like pan over the empty streets, and I was like, fuck.
It's like, I don't know if I want to relive that. But let's just say that post-pandemic, this team, like my old company did, just goes completely virtual. They're like, you know what? We don't need office space. Why are we paying for this? Everyone can just work from home. So you've got lots of people who are working from home, but they're doing a lot of their business through these Zoom calls. And there's this creepy IT guy that has been sexually harassing some of the people on the team. So they fire him. So the woman who's in charge of this team is like, you know what? You're fired. And then, everyone's relieved and they come back to the next Zoom call and he's there. And you can't get him off because he's figured out the IT hacks that he needs to do, that he is cut-offable from these Zoom calls. So he starts just by freaking people out because he won't not be there. And if they try to set up a new room, he just pops up in that one too. And then you start to like, oh my God, somebody goes over to his house to try to like put a stop to this stuff. And they go into his house and he's dead. And so it's like, oh my God, he was killed. And then the next day he pops up in the Zoom call again. So it's like, is he a ghost? Like, what the fuck is going on? And then somebody else tries to go over there and then gets, and then he starts popping up as other people. Like the screen goes, and then it's him back again. And you find out that the person he did that to is now dead in their home. It's like, is he going around to people's homes and killing them? And is he a ghost? And what the fuck is going on? And I think what I would like to do is have it set up that it actually wasn't his dead body in his house, but it was somebody else that he had killed, so that he actually isn't dead, but he is, going around killing people and like doing these weird IT hacks and, coming in from their backyards or whatever. But I think that could be just a really interesting, because when you're on a Zoom call, it's like you both look like you're at home, but I don't know where you are. You know what I mean? You could be anywhere, and you could be doing anything. And is that even you? And, we're kind of dependent on these cameras, and it just, there's a lot of stuff there that I think you could craft something really freaky and really scary.
That's really creepy. I love it.
Yeah.
Super creep.
Hollywood, call us. What are you doing? Say that all the time. Okay, that was a fun game, but I mean, it was one of those things like, it kind of reminded me, it was like Lucille Fletcher did this. She took this thing and says, oh, a telephone. Has anyone ever exploited this to make a horror thing out of it? And I'm like, we could do the same thing. There's new technology all the time. And once it becomes kind of part of our daily lives, it's just an interesting way to make things scary. So thanks for playing that game.
Yeah.
I totally thought you said hellophone, not telephone. Like that's like, sounds like an 80s horror film.
I mean, it could be. It could be.
I would watch Hellophone.
Me too. Yeah. Me too.
Only in Halloween week with friends.
Yeah.
And wine. Okay, it is time for how we end up all of our shows with skip, rent, or buy. If you've never tuned into the Rewind Project before, this is where we play critic, although not really. This is just, these are our personal opinions, and we invite our listeners to do whatever they want to do. But skip means, I wish I'd never seen this movie. Eric, why did you make me watch it? Rent means, I'm glad I saw it, or, fine, it was okay. I don't need to watch it again. I watched it and that was good. Buy means I will watch this movie again and again. It's brilliant. It's a work of genius. Can't wait to watch it a second time to pick up all the things I missed the time before. So we're going to go in reverse order. Matt, clearly you loved this movie, so I just can't wait to hear your rave review.
This is a total buy for me, really.
He already bought it. FYI.
I've watched it multiple times since. No, I skip. This is a. Yeah, I would have burned the original so nobody else had to watch it. Track down all the streams, get rid of them all. Yeah, skip.
And Allie, where are we?
I have a very solid rent. I enjoyed this movie. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't really know what it was much about, obviously, other than the fact that, she's sort of an invalid in bed and there's a wrong number. But yeah, I was entertained the whole time. I really did. I think that they could have trimmed it even more. Yes, absolutely. Did I see the sort of like stitching process to make it longer than 30 minutes? Sure. But I was entertained the whole time. I really did enjoy it. So.
Yeah, I think I'm a solid rent as well. I'm a big fan, obviously, of Barbara Stanwyck. I think all of the movies that we have watched of hers, I have personally chosen to watch all of those. I think she's underrated as an actor today. I think we talk a lot more about Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, and for some reason, Barbara Stanwyck just doesn't get mentioned as much, but she could really do it all. She's really great in romantic comedy as well. We've never seen her do that, but The Lady Eve is a great Henry Fonda, Barbara Stanwyck, madcap kind of romantic comedy on a cruise. She's very funny. I just really like her. So I was excited to see a Barbara Stanwyck film, and I knew it was a major piece of her kind of filmography. Do I need to watch this again and again? I do not. I feel like I got it. I picked up what they were putting down and I'm good. But yeah, it was 89 minutes. I think had this been 4 hours, I'm looking at you, Matthew Graff, that would have been a different story. But 89 minutes long, it's fine, so I was okay. So 2 rents and a skip.
Pretty good.
not bad. That works. That works for me. That tracks. Next up, join us in a week. We are watching a movie that I have legit never heard of in my life before Matthew Graff put it up and said, let's watch this one in 1948. I'm like, what is that movie? I don't even know what it is. But I've certainly heard of Jimmy Stewart and Lee J. Cobb, who are the two stars of Call Northside 777, which is a cop noir experience. And I have no idea what I'm in for, but you know what? Join us in a week and you will find out. This has been the Rerun Project. I am Eric.
I'm Allie.
I'm Matt.
Be kind. Rewind.
You've been listening to The Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.
She's a fragile creature, Matthew.